Second straight weekend without a Cowboys game. It won't stop us from talking about their uncertain future, though. 103.3 ESPN Radio's Mark Friedman joins me now. Friedo, the NFC East coaching vacancies, they've all been filled, and they're all offensive guys. In fact, 3 of them were former quarterbacks, including Jason Garrett. And do these hires affect what the Cowboys may be able to do next season, you think?
You know, it's really interesting because you hear defense wins championships, but all of these coaches are offensive coaches. And the other thing about the coaches that have been hired is the NFC East has a tradition of all these great coaches. Some of the greatest coaches in the history of the game have come from the NFC East, and I'd say that coaching crop is not quite to that par right now.
It doesn't seem to be the case, and you look at Doug Peterson, Ben McAdoo with the Giants, and these are a lot of unknowns, as it were, and that's what makes it so difficult to predict, is that there's no real track record to go back on to say that they will be successful as head coaches.
That's unpredictable, and with the Cowboys' issues were this season. You know, you could say, hey, it was just Romo, it was just a collarbone, everything's going to be okay. But I think that you're not doing your job if you're on the Cowboys coaching staff or front office and just attributing everything to an injury.
Shameless plug alert here on Sports Sunday last weekend. Jeremy Mincy said the chemistry changed when they brought on Greg Hardy. Knowing that revelation and knowing his off-the-field troubles, should the Cowboys consider still keeping him?
I think that at the right price, they might still want to consider keeping him. But, you know, hearing what Jeremy Mincy said with Ducey, I don't see how you bring Mincy and Hardy back. I also don't know if you can bring Hardy back if he really was that disruption. We heard about a lot, but what concerns me is what we didn't hear about, what we don't know that went on with Greg Hardy, because it seemed like a lot of people were frustrated.
That is the ultimate balance, isn't it? It's like when you hear something, it's just the tip of the iceberg, especially in this Cowboys organization where you know there's a lot more underneath, but you know we may never hear about it.
Absolutely. If you, it's like almost like if you see one roach, you know there's 1,000 others somewhere else.
Right. Well, there are a lot of backup quarterbacks available for Tony Romo. That's kind of the big thing that we're talking about with this upcoming draft. Johnny Manziel, RG3, some of the big names. Should they grab one of those quote-unquote veteran quarterbacks, or do you feel like that the next backup quarterback for the Cowboys should be someone they find in the draft?
It'd be great if you could find your backup quarterback and your quarterback for the future in the draft, and it's the same guy. It's hard to do, though, because really, if you look at it, if you go into next season with Tony Romo at quarterback, do you really want a rookie who's never taken a snap in the NFL as your insurance policy? So, I mean, it's a real fine line, and I think the biggest mistake you can make is going out there and reaching for a quarterback because you think you need one.
Did Kellen Moore prove anything to you?
Small
sample size, yes, but
he proved that he could be a backup quarterback, maybe a third-string quarterback, maybe a scout team quarterback. I'm not comfortable right now with Kellen Moore being my backup quarterback.
Now, many mock drafts say the Cowboys are going to go either wide receiver, maybe even defensive lineman with that number 4 overall pick. Both positions have a lot of talent. What do you think of those two? Or maybe if there's another position that you feel like is a bigger need for Dallas?
I think they can't go wrong in either one of those positions. Either one, and then there's plenty of positions the Cowboys, and that's one of the good things about drafting so high and being in the position the Cowboys are in. It's going to be hard for them to go wrong in the draft unless they go out there and reach for someone. And, you know, that's the one thing about the mock drafts. The mock drafts have been out so far. They've been very inconsistent, and they're always inconsistent this time of year. But the one thing that has been consistent through mock draft has been that the Cleveland Browns are drafting a quarterback.
Right.
And if the Cleveland Browns are drafting a quarterback, that means that the best quarterback available is likely not to be there when the Cowboys draft 4th. So I think their draft pick will be wide open, and there's plenty of positions that they can choose from and make a good, solid selection.
And perhaps the worst thing to do in that situation is to reach. At the very least, if you really want a quarterback like the Memphis quarterback or someone like that, you trade down and then pick them up, and that way you still maintain value.
People will go crazy if the Cowboys trade down and trade out of that number 4 selection.
Now, here's an interesting idea. Now, you hear a lot from starting quarterbacks, past and present, that they may not necessarily want the organization to draft a quarterback because there's that jealousy factor. That's the heir apparent, as it were. Do you feel like if the Cowboys go wide receiver, that may pose some problems with Dez Bryant because he may not get all the catches that he wants?
You know, that is a really interesting question. I think that if you add another wide receiver in the first round, I think Dez will be just fine. Dez is secure with his contract. And Dez would need to look at it like things will open up for me if we get another stud wide receiver. Now, I think you pose a great question, though, because it's a very delicate situation.
Well, on that note, we'll see how this plays out. We only have several months before the draft takes place, so we've got plenty of time to speculate.
We'll have a lot of these conversations.
Exactly. Hey, Friedo, Steve Dennis, 11 to 3 weekdays on 103.3 ESPN Radio. Friedman, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thank you.
And I'm Edward Egros, Fox 4 Sports.